Good afternoon, Saurabh Saha.
Hey, good afternoon, Ravi.
Shall we start this session, sir?
Sure.
Uh,
Do you
Sir,
have
please start.
do you have the slide that I sent you?
Sorry, sir.
Do you have the slide I sent you last time?
Yes, sir, I have.
Okay. You want to play it at your end?
No, sir, kindly play by yourself. And as per the slide, you can run the slide. So do it by yourself, sir. If required, so I can also move the slide, but it is advisable to run the slide as per your convenience.
Okay. So give me a minute to find that slide.
Areen, please start.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today, I, Fareen Fatima, student of BBA batch 2024-27, welcomes Academy for startup and legal and ethical steps. Under the activities of Quarter 3 of Institutional Innovation Council, the ICC. It is a program by the Ministry of Education and AICTE to foster a cultural and innovational entrepreneurship with higher education institutions. I take this honor to welcome our esteemed speaker, Mr. Saurabh Saha, sir, with whose insights we are looking forward to. I would also like to extend a heartfelt welcome to our respected director, Dr. V.V. Gopal sir, our dean, Dr. Suchita Vishwakarma ma'am, faculty members, and all my fellow mates. Saurabh Saha sir is an entrepreneur and a product leader with 15 plus years in startups and enterprise. A Stanford and ISB alumnus, he founded India's first experiential school for product management and India's first job distribution engine. His best selling book on product management has sold 30,000 copies, and he mentors startups and product managers as a recognized industry expert. Without further ado, I now invite Saurabh Saha sir to take over and begin the session.
Thank you so much for that warm introduction. I hope I'm audible. Am I?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir, you are audible.
Awesome. So let me just go and share the slide that I have opened. But I think more than the slide, I would like to share four things with you guys. Just give me a second. So you will have to give me the right to share the screen. I don't have a right to share the screen right now.
Risu, sir?
Yes, I can't share the screen. You'll have to give me the right to share the screen.
Okay, sir. Risu, sir, please help.
Is my screen Can you guys view my screen?
Yes, sir.
Thanks. All right. Thank you so much for the warm introduction. I believe, suspect I have around 52 minutes to be precise. So I'll just try to wrap it up as soon as possible. But I think the focus over here, I don't think you can learn anything about entrepreneurship in just 52 minutes. So that's the blunt truth of things. So I would like more and more questions so that I would like to wrap it up because this would seem very theoretical to you, and I don't think any of you will retain even 5% of what I tell you in the next 52 minutes. So let's be frank and candid on those things, and let me try to wrap this 20 pages slide by giving you three things. So I'll divide the session into three parts. First part would be the legal process involved in entrepreneurship. The second part would be the ethical concerns around entrepreneurship, and the third part would be the process of entrepreneurship itself. I have been an entrepreneur in my previous life. I'm still an entrepreneur. We have just launched an AI company 2 weeks back, and I spent 2 decades building software across Silicon Valley, across Europe, and across Bangalore. And then I moved to product management and different things. I started my few own companies, and then I moved to a little bit around politics to understand how policy works in government. And I was also the advisor to the CM of Punjab for this. And now in the last 1 year or so, I have been into the AI space, trying to understand how AI startups can function. So to start with, I would like to talk about the legal concerns or the legal issues around startups. So when you start up in India, you're supposed to register your company. There are different models of registering your company. I mean, you can do a simple Google or go to Perplexity and ask what are the different kinds of models available for registration of a startup, and it will come up with a bunch of answers. But to make affairs simple for you, the most commonly used model for startups is the private limited model, which all of you would have seen, which requires two directors. And if you look at MCA or Ministry of Corporate Affairs, it defines that you need to be issued 10,000 shares in a specific proportion. There has to be a working capital of minimum 1 lakh that you need to place in your account. And both the directors are assigned a director identification number, and your company is assigned a SIN or a company identification number. And then there is an incorporation certificate that states the same, saying that your company has been incorporated. Now it's a functional entity as per the Ministry of Corporate Affairs. So now you can do business in India, and that company needs to have an account, because when you do business, you will make money, right? Revenue will come to you. The revenue has to come somewhere. So there is a current account that you tend to open up in a bank of your choice, and you get all kinds of facility for that. You something like just like PAN card, you also get a PAN for your company, and that that is the way to do business in India. Most startups that you see around here, most companies like which have grown big, like Flipkart or maybe Zomato or Swiggy, all of them are private limited companies. But having said that, this is just a very small bracket of businesses in India. If you look at smaller businesses, which are around 80 to 85% in India, the informal industry is pretty huge in India. So if you look around Lucknow, you would find that if you go to Aminabad and all these places, you will find small businesses. There could be a shop, there could be a showroom, there could be a small guys, selling chai, or maybe, small chai ki tapri and all. So all of them come under this particular model called sole proprietorship, which is the simplest model to incorporate a company. And essentially, what you do is that you become the sole proprietor to the company, and it's something that small businesses do. But when you talk about startups, it does not apply in the case of startups, because startups are supposed to scale up exponentially. So scale ups in terms of revenue, scale up in terms of the valuation, which has been happening over the last 1 decade or so. So this model does not bode well with startups. And then there are models like the LLC model, where the limited liability corporation, limited liability partnership. There are partnership models and all that. But the most popular one that has popped out in the last 2 decades is the private limited company. So any company, any major company in India, could be a Reliance or could be a Tata or could be a Godrej, is essentially a private limited company. So that's the legal part. According to me, it's not that important. I mean, it's okay to have some sound knowledge of it, but because most of it is done by your chartered accountant. So you as an entrepreneur need to know a little bit about it. need to know a little bit about the equity math behind behind starting a company and all that. But I don't think you need to go deep into it unless you are a corporate finance student and you want to understand, or you're a company secretary, because that is your line of business. That is where you operate. So that's the legal part of things, and not, according to me, not that important. The other part that I was supposed to cover was the ethical concerns, right? Now, ethical concerns typically means that ethical, moral, legal, there are different aspects of starting a startup. But ethical typically means that something which is ethically correct, right? For instance, if you, like, for instance, I'll give an example. Today in the morning, there was a company which was using this Pahalgam attack as an excuse to sell its products. So a lot of people on Twitter or X came and basically, trolled it big time and, basically prosecuted it and all that. And now it has shut down that particular advertisement. So ethical concern is mean that something which falls in the realm of ethical behavior. A glaring example would be, I don't know how many people have heard about this company called Theranos. Um, just raise your hand if you've heard about Theranos. Has anyone in the group of students heard about Theranos? Okay. So I take that none of you have heard of Theranos, but Theranos was a company which was started by a person called Elizabeth Holmes back in California. She was a brilliant student and she started this company, and she told the world that she's going to build a system where this cost of blood test, will come down drastically. Because what happens today is that for different kinds of diagnosis, you have to basically do different kinds of blood tests. So if it's a, so you have to give your blood like 10,000 times, and then they take your blood, and then the procedure is painful, and it kind of makes things complicated, cumbersome, and uncomfortable for you. So she figured out that, if you can sort of give me blood just one time, I have devised a machine that can track the blood and give you all kinds of diagnosis in one shot. And she was very, she was very convincing. Her pitch was almost picture perfect. So most of the investor community in the valley, private equity, venture capital firms, they fell for it because she was grossly convincing. Like, she was super convincing. And they funded her and everything. And then I think later on it was found that she was just bluffing. So now she's behind bars, and all of that has happened. So there have been a lot of issues around ethical behavior in corporates. Some of the known cases would be, some of you would know, but I'm betting, since you guys are young, none of you would know that there was a company called Satyam Computers, and there was a scandal around Satyam Computers for cooking their books. Similarly, there was an Enron scam that happened, and we all know about Harshad Mehta. And so a lot of these people typically cross the boundary where their behavior was no longer ethical and also was subject to uh, legalese per se, because they cross the legal behavior also. But sometimes it's quite possible that you could do something which might not be illegal, but it's not ethical. For instance, one of the examples that comes to mind is that in Karnataka, especially northern Karnataka, you would find that a lot of mining activity has happened in the last 20 years. But the logic is that the more you mine, the soil becomes loose actually. So there's a chance of, if an earthquake comes or something, then the land can actually crack, and a lot of these people living in that area would be affected. But nonetheless, this did not stop the companies from basically mining like crazy. So this was not ethical behavior, right? A lot of times you would find that if you look at Procter and Gamble and companies which are into FMCG products, right? You would find the product that they're selling in Europe and the product that they're selling in India are, although the same product, are different. So in India, they are selling a kit Cerelac or a kit's powder, which has more sugar as compared to the same product which is selling in Europe, let's say in Germany or France and all, or maybe US. So that does not fall within the realms of ethical behavior, although it is not illegal unless the government decides to make it illegal. So I think the idea over here is that there is a new concept that has popped out in the last 10 years, and it's called conscious capitalism. So the model that we have followed so far in the world was typically crony capitalism. And the idea was that capitalists will, sort of form a nexus with politicians, and they would do whatever they want to do for the sake of profit at the cost of human lives, right? If you read a little bit of geopolitics, you will understand there is an author called Naomi Klein, and I think there's an Oscar-winning movie called The Constant Gardener, which showed that a lot of pharmaceutical companies in the US would basically do drug testing in Africa and basically provide these starving and hungry people food just for testing the medicines on them. So because of those medicinal tests, almost close to 2 to 3 million people died in Africa. Although they were not prosecuted by the International Court of Justice and various criminal organizations, not criminal, but I would say justice organizations. But again, what they did killed people. So I would not term it ethical. So Naomi Klein has written a lot of stuff around that. If you look at the Vedanta group, they have also done a lot of these activities in different. So there are a lot of corporates which have basically, collaborated with with the federal government and then try to basically do something that has affected the lives of millions of people in a negative way. So that does not fall within the confines of ethical behavior per se. So now, after all of that, I think there is a very famous documentary on Netflix, if you have access to Netflix, which talks about how why capitalism is dead, right? And then it talks about the concept of conscious capitalism, where you do things ensuring that it does not negatively impact human lives. So the idea over here is as simple as that whatever you do should not have a negative impact on any human life. Now, uh, there is a very famous paradoxical situation here that we might say all the same, but when it comes to weapon companies, let's say like Lockheed Martin or Halliburton, or many other weapon companies, I think they profit from situations where human lives are getting affected negatively, like a war. So there is no war, nobody will buy Lockheed Martin's missiles, or nobody would buy tanks from Halliburton or planes from Rafale or any other weapons company. So weapon companies is a little, I would say, a sticky patch where they need to ensure that there is a warlike situation anywhere, and the same applies to pharmaceutical companies. Unless there is a component of fear psychosis, unless they endorse fear, people will not buy medications, right? So a lot of times it's happened that, and in India, typically, I remember that there was one point in time there was a plague in Gujarat back in 90s, and it was only confined to Surat, a small city in Gujarat. But everyone across India bought tetracycline just in order to prevent, because everyone was so scared because the advertisement that these pharmaceutical companies came up with spoke about uh, spoke about the negative impact of medications and all that. So these typically do not fall within the realms of ethical behavior. So as an entrepreneur, if you're doing something, if you're starting a business, do ensure that your business does not impact anybody or does not affect a human life or human lives in a negative way. So that has all to do with ethical behavior. Now I'll move to the meaty part of the conversation, which is about starting a company. Uh, I will share the slide with you, so I'm not really following a slide and reading stuff about all the things. But as an entrepreneur, I think I mean, I have been an entrepreneur, so I can tell you from my experience, and I have written a book on product and entrepreneurship. I've been mentored hundreds of entrepreneurs over the years. So I think what I'll essentially tell you is that there are certain things I mean, the entire process could be divided into different parts categorically. So I would say the part which are important is that the first part. The first part is that when you decide to become an entrepreneur, right? Let's say you're in your college and you're sitting with your friend talking about something, and suddenly, sir, you come across a brilliant idea according to you, and then you say, "कि यार कुछ करते हैं, let's do something about it, and let's build a startup around it and all that." So out of 100, 95 people are able to take this conversation ahead, saying that, hey, you know what, this looks good actually, let's do something about it. So दो दोस्त मिलते हैं आपस में, दो दे सिट एंड दे टॉक अबाउट दिस एट लेंथ एंड दे डू सम रिसर्च एंड एवरीथिंग, और ये इस तरीके से ये बात आगे जाती है. दैट्स द फर्स्ट स्टेज. The second stage is the execution part, where you are able to execute. Once you find that this is indeed a problem worth solving, you're trying to figure out the value proposition through which you can solve this problem. At the execution level, out of these 95 people, right, only about, say, 25 to 30 remain. So when I say execution, I mean the prototype development or the MVP development and all that. For people who don't know about MVP, it's called the minimum viable product or the minimum lovable product, whichever whatever you call it. But it typically revolves around building a basic one feature product that can solve the problem the customer has. So a lot of people are not able, out of these 25, 30 people, close to 15 people, 20 people can't build the prototype for XYZ reason. That has been my observation. So you're left with only 10 people who have been able to build this product. And now comes the part where most of them kind of fail, right? And that part is the distribution part. अभी प्रोडक्ट बन गया है, अभी इसके बारे में लोगों को बताना है कि मेरे पास एक प्रोडक्ट है. नाउ योर कस्टमर विल ईदर बी अ बिजनेस or a government or a retail customer. So if you're a customer of Zomato, you are a retail customer. If you're running a business and you're using something like a Tally, you are a business customer. And if you're a government, right, procuring some software, let's say MS Word or something from Microsoft, then it's a federal customer. But to keep things simple, I would say I would categorize government slash businesses in one category, and on the other category you have the retail customer, which is called the consumer or the B2C consumer. So typically, when it comes to consumer tech or consumer products or consumer goods, which any consumer product that you see, the marketing part is very difficult because, and that too in a company in a country like India, because India is the most, I think, the only country in the world where people are extremely price conscious. Price conscious because typically you can divide India. I don't know how many people have seen that Nikhil Kamath video where he interviews Kishore Biani. And Kishore Biani talks about the consumer segment in India. He divides them broadly into three categories. India one, which is the category which is actually, the white collar job people living in Bangalore, Hyderabad, Pune's of the world, and making disposable income that they can splurge on different essential commodities, right? And then you have India two, and this segment is like probably, I think, 250 million or 220 million. Then you have India two, which is around the guys who work for India One. So you could be working for a company like Oracle, and you would have a maid, you would have a cook, you would have. So this is India Two. This is typically 400 million, if I'm not wrong, 400 million or 450 million. And then you have India Three. India Three, if I use this word in Hindi, it might not sound a little derogatory, but I'd say that India Three is typically the Dihadi Mazdoor, somebody who will come and get a daily wager, like a construction site का मजदूर, or like somebody who will come, आपके घर में आप construction के लिए labor बुलाते हो. So anybody who gets a daily wager is typically India 3. Now, India 3 is the largest segment, which is like around 850 million to 900 million people. So essentially, the consumption pattern of India 1, India 2, India 3 is what constitutes the revenues for companies like Zomato, Swiggy, and any other consumer tech companies. Or maybe the consumer goods companies or consumer durable companies, whichever the case be. So essentially, if according to the studies done, India 2 and India 3, you haven't seen much of income growth over the last 15 years. But India 1 has grown drastically. So after 91 ka liberalization, because of corporates coming in and setting up their bases here, GCCs and service companies opening up in India, and some manufacturing units, some consumer electronics, XYZ. India, one number of white collar jobs has gone up to 220 to 250 or to 300 million at most. Uh, uh, but then their incomes have risen like crazy, exponentially they've risen actually. But India 2 and India 3, their incomes have risen as much as 1% or 0.5%. So even if they want to buy something, they can't buy. So then that's a different category altogether, which telecom companies are targeting to sell cheaper data pack. That is why you have like a 10 rupee ka data pack or a 50 rupee ka data pack, because entertainment is still one of the things that Indian audience likes to spend, whether it is India 1, India 2, or India 3. Well, coming back to the discussion, the reason why India 1 does not, the fact that even if it's India 1, they are still very price conscious. If you go to South, let's say go to 12 bigger cities in India like Bangalore, Gurgaon, Noida, Hyderabad, Thiruvananthapuram, Trivandrum, Pune, Bombay, 10, 12 big A cities, A-class cities in India, people do spend on a lot of things that they feel are essential for their existence or entertainment or leisure or whatever. But when you come to very B-class cities like a Lucknow, right, you would find that the spending is not as much as one would have in Bangalore. So if you were to start a startup in, let's say, Lucknow, you would, and you want to target customers in Lucknow, you would have to be extremely cautious with the price part. And what is it? How am I going to price my product? Because if I price my product at this price, right, then chances are that this lower middle class segment might not be able to afford it. If I price it too high, too low, then my product becomes a commodity, because then I'm competing purely on price as opposed to value. So having said all of that, the important part over here to recollect is that distribution part is the most difficult part in entrepreneurship. A lot of companies, a lot of startups, on an average, 90% startups fail because of distribution. So it's easy to build a product, but it's difficult to get customers to come and typically pay money. Now, when you go to the B2B side, on the B2C side, you will basically use digital marketing and all those things to basically sell products. Uh, and it's difficult because, let's say you put up an ad, and I'm talking purely about B2C companies. Let's say you put up an ad, let's say on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and different other channels. You don't know where people will come from. You have no idea whether, and then maybe you do email marketing also, you do organic marketing on Google also, you pay Google some money and do some search engine marketing and everything, and you have no idea where people are going to come from. So typically in social media, the click through rate means that how many people out of 100 people who see your ad, only 8% will click. Which I'm being a little optimistic. So if the click-through rate is five people, then five, almost let's say 5%, then five people will click. So those five people will come to your website. Now, when they come to your website, out of those five people, the conversion rates typically are 0. Let's say 1% or maybe 1%, 0.9% or 1% at most. So if you were to crack conversion, which means that conversion gives revenue, because when you're selling something, let's say every transaction on Zomato is conversion for Zomato. So when you order food on Zomato or Swiggy, and you pay, let's say, $300, the $50 that the commission that Zomato charges on that will typically go is the revenue Zomato is making for that particular order. So in that rate for a new startup is as low as 0.9 to 0.5%. सो पांच का अगर आपने पांच लोग आपके साइट पे आए हैं तो 0.5% ऑफ 5 is what the conversion rate will be. So if you were to increase that conversion rate, you would have to reach out to as many people as possible, because 100 का अगर पांच है, पांच click through rate है, so if you go to 1,000, then the click through rate will be more than 5. If you target 10,000 people, then the click through rate will be again more than that. So the more people you have at the top of the funnel, chances are that your conversion rate will correspondingly increase. That is how the B2C company works. Now we come to the B2B company, which is where you have companies selling to other companies. Now, in this case, there is no digital marketing that works. The process is to basically have a sales team and a business development team. And these guys typically chase the decision makers in that larger company or the B2B, the other business, and convince them to basically try out their products. And after a lengthy 3 or 6 month chase, it finally converts to a deal. But unlike B2C companies or the consumer tech companies or consumer good companies, the ticket sizes are large here. So there it might happen that you ended up chasing a client, and after 6 months, the client agreed to your proposition, and you were able to sell it, let's say for $1 million. So एक झटके में आपके पास $1 million आ गया. So B2B companies don't need to go for mass audience, right? So an Amazon, for that instance, would want to go for a mass audience because Amazon will make money on volumes. But if you look at an Apple, Apple again does not target the mass audience. It targets a niche audience, which it knows that will buy any Apple product. So it keeps on releasing. In every 6 months, it will come up with a new product, the same phone in a different wrapper, the same phone with almost identical features, with a new narrative and all that, and people will fall for it and again buy. So that's the fandom we have in India and other places. But that apart, I think B2B customers, the process is very different. So and you have to typically chase. What I'm trying to essentially point out is that sales is tough. Marketing is tougher, and marketing might not result in sales. And unless sales happens, you'll not make any revenue. You'd be surprised to find that a large number of companies in India do not have any revenue. They run purely on hype, they run purely on marketing and stuff like that, but they're not making any revenues. Now, the most important part, I guess I'm left with 26 minutes, so I'll utilize this part in saying that there are two models in India that we have seen. One model, which I call the Reid Hoffman school of thought, and Reid Hoffman is the founder of LinkedIn, is typically the model where you have companies grow exponentially. You want them to grow crazy, actually. So there's a lot of pressure on the startups. You fund the company, you ask them to basically grow like crazy, have 1 million users or 1 million customers, and then you again fund them, ask them to grow. The underlying idea over here is that if I capture a large size of the market in a smaller time, then I'm able to monopolize my stance. But that does not really work out well because what happens is that in the absence of revenue, and if something happens, let's say the federal government in the US increased the rep rates by 2%, then that affects the internal rate of revenue or internal return rate for venture capitals to their LPs. So most venture capitals will not get any money from their limited partners. Um, Now that I'm speaking about funding, I should give you guys some basic idea that in hyper growth, you tend to pick money from people. And these people are different kinds of investors. They're called investors generally, but there are different categories of investors. The moment you start a startup and somebody wants to fund your idea because they like you or they like your idea, that guy is typically called an angel guy, right? And or a seed investor, and they will typically come. The first investors typically is FFF, which is quintessentially called family, friends, and fools, because only fools can fund an initial idea. So that's the term that is used in the valley. I suppose it's still used in Bangalore or Hyderabad, but not sure about Lucknow. So this is the first stage of investor who comes and funds your family, namely your papa or mummy, who will basically say, "ठीक है बेटा तू 10 लाख ले ले और कर ले ये सब." The next stage of investor, who is a serious investor, is who has the maximum amount of risk, is the seed investor or the angel investor, which you keep hearing about. The third stage of investor, who comes potentially after the second investor, the angel investor or the seed investor, is typically called a venture capital. And if your company grows really big, like Oyo or any of these bigger companies, you would basically have something like a private equity or a hedge fund approach you. In this case, it could be a Tamsec or maybe SoftBank or Tiger Global and DST Global. These are the larger bodies which have funded crazy amount of which have basically infused crazy amount of money in startups. So these are the four categories of investors, but these investors typically want you to grab as much growth as possible, as much market as possible, so that you can monopolize your stand. Abhi tak that model hasn't worked very well for a lot of companies, let's say an Uber or an Ola or any company in India. Any startup that has followed the hypergrowth model has turned out to be a loss-making entity. Almost all companies in India, like a Byju's or a Ola or Uber or Zomato or any of the, or maybe Paytm, everybody is loss-making because they never figured out a way to make money. They never figured out a way to, turn their revenue into profits. So they were just focusing on getting the next round, and which is why the hyper growth model has somewhat failed in India. That said, there is another model which a small number of companies have followed. It's called the sustainable model. The companies that have started with this model are supposed to be bootstrapped, which means that they did not take any money from anybody. They kept the entire equity to themselves and grew up organically, focused on making revenues and making profit, and did not grow exponentially, but took some time to grow. But now they are at a stage when they have scaled up and everything, when they have, uh, you know, good revenue to show and also good amount of profit. So one glaring example would be the company called Zerodha, started by Kamath brothers. Nikhil Kamath, I suppose everyone knows Nikhil Kamath, and Nitin Kamath, two brothers who started this trading platform. And their entire venture is 100% family owned. So there is no pressure on them to do anything crazy. Like if you take money from an investor, there's a lot of pressure on you to do this, do that, do this, do that. So as an entrepreneur, sometimes your creative ideas could be dismissed or dissed by the investor because he does not like it. Sometimes you might not want to sell your company, but there is so much pressure on you that you'll have to sell your company. A friend of mine who picked up money from a renowned investor in Bangalore, was forced to sell his company, and then went to the bank and bought back the shares from the investor to safeguard his company. So there's a lot of pressure on founders who accept money from an angel investor, or so the moment you take money, you become a sort of a slave to the investor, and you have to follow what he says. Sometimes he might be right, sometimes he might not be right. In my limited experience, if I'm being a little myopic or biased, I would say that most of the investors you would meet in India were not entrepreneurs. Unlike the US, if you are in the Bay Area, let's say San Francisco or Mountain View, any of these areas, you would find a lot of these investors who are from, let's say, Anderson Horowitz or Kleiner Perkins and any of these investment houses. They were entrepreneurs themselves for 20 years. So they understand that it takes time for a company to grow from 8 to 10 years, or 12 years. In India, we have that साहूकार mentality, कि अभी पैसा दे दिया है तो 2 साल में मेरे को 1.5 साल में रिटर्न चाहिए, which does not work out in technology startups because there is a curve that you follow, and there are different kinds of customer segments that you chase. So if you there is something called a technology adoption life cycle, or the customer adoption life cycle, where there are different kinds of customers that come to you. First kind of customers would be early adopters and innovators, uh, who might not be the right customers because you release anything and they will come and try your product out, but they will not buy it. The actual customers come a little later, but between the early adopters, innovators, and the early majority, there is a chasm or a gap. A lot of companies die in that gap. आप कह सकते हो कि आप पहाड़ के उस पॉइंट पे पहुंच के नीचे गिर जाते हो, वहां तक नहीं जा पाते हो. So only a very few companies reach something called a product market fit, which is means that कि आपके प्रोडक्ट की डिमांड है मार्केट में और लोग खरीद रहे हैं और पैसा दे रहे हैं. That is enough validation कि आपका प्रोडक्ट की जरूरत है. And growth kind of explodes at that point. मतलब आपके पास इतना ज्यादा क्वेरीज और रिक्वेस्ट, आपके प्रोडक्ट इतना बिकने लगता है कि यू डोंट हैव एनी काउंट ऑफ कि कितना बिक रहा है. You, I mean, sales complete, the sales process goes crazy. So that is the one idea. That is the third stage, tracking distribution, and the fourth stage is hitting PMF. PMF मतलब जो मैंने अभी बताया कि आपके प्रोडक्ट हिट हो गया, सर्विस हिट हो गई, लोग आने लगे और लेने लगे. PMF के बाद there is one more stage where you're a profitable company or you have grown certain point and you want to sort of raise, uh, you want to scale your company now. That is what has been happening over the years, that you've seen a Flipkart, which started in the flat where I used to live in Bangalore, right next to me, which was a small 2 BHK flat with Sachin Bansal and Vinny Bansal selling books. And then it grew to be a large company, which eventually Walmart acquired for 19 billion, 16 billion to be precise. So they scaled up to that level. So the last step is towards scaling up, where a lot of companies which have hit product market fit find it unable to sort of scale to that level. And that's where private equity comes, and they accept a crazy amount of cash from private equity, who goes ahead and buys back all the equity from different investors who make an exit at that time. अभी इन्वेस्टर का मोटिव क्या है? इन्वेस्टर का मोटिव है कि अगर मैं 1 करोड़ मिला रहा हूँ इसकी कंपनी में, तो मेरे को 4 साल में, 5 साल में 5 करोड़ चाहिए, 10 करोड़ चाहिए. तो ही इज वेटिंग फॉर एन एग्जिट इन द 3 to 5 years. इसलिए देर इज एन इमेंस प्रेशर on the founder to show growth or show revenue in such a way that this investor can make an exit. Exit का मतलब होता है, exit term थोड़ा सा misleading है, but इसका मतलब होता है कि a company hits a point where an investor can make money from it. So the first instrument of exit would be the most common one is an IPO. कि आप एक इनिशियल पब्लिक ऑफरिंग स्टॉक एक्सचेंज में रजिस्टर करते हो, एंड देन you issue some shares to the public will buy the shares and you make money from that. So now when your stock is listed in the stock exchange, the investor can sell the stock because he gets hell lot of stocks. He can sell the stocks and make money. He can convert the stocks into money, or liquidate it. The other part would be somebody acquires your company. When somebody comes and acquires your company, and the investor and he buys the percentage that investor holds and gives investor money for that. So that is another way of making money. And the third, which is not, I have not heard it in India, but I think there's a very famous book called Barbarian at the Gates, which talks about something called a leverage buyout, where a well-running, profitable company could be bought out by external investors by convincing the board of a price that they will pay per strike price. The strike price is almost 10 times higher than the current price of the stock. And then companies form. Um, so I think I'm done with my rant. If there is anything you wish to ask, feel free to ask in the next 15 minutes. Uh, but remember this basic thing that I told you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The forum is now open for questions. If anyone wants to ask anything, they may ask by unmuting themselves.
Good morning, sir. This side Janvi Vadera. I have a question. What are the key elements of a strong, unique selling proposition, and how can a new startup identify this?
I think you have to come out of that theoretical bookish thing that you're reading right now and think and use a little bit of common sense. I think the idea is that think of yourself as a customer, right? I mean, think of yourself going to the market, right? When you go to the market, let's say a mall, what is the logic on which you buy things, right? So if you buy something, you don't buy on the basis of color, right? You don't buy on the basis of something, it's looking this and that and all. But you buy anything because it provides some value. So if it provides some value, it's you bought a pencil, and that pencil provides some value in terms of कि यार उसका जो pencil. I'm just giving a very theoretical, hypothetical example, but that pencil lasts longer than normal pencils. Then that is more value for you. So you have to figure out that how can I provide value to this customer? How can I provide value? Your entire focus should be so customer centric that you should know that if I am building something to solve this problem, am I doing a job better than 5x or 10x better than, or maybe 100x better than the current alternatives or not? If I'm not doing it, then chances are that I'll be another guy in the market doing the same thing. आप इंडिया में देखो हमेशा कॉपी कैट मॉडल्स होते हैं, राइट? So in entrepreneurship, you have to basically ask, which I call and which we call the first principles. That why is it that other companies are not able to solve this problem? There are, let's say, 6 competitors in this space. Why is it that they are not able to solve this problem? So there is a famous book called The Blue Ocean Strategy. I don't know how many of you have heard of it or read it, but the idea is that there are 2 kinds of markets. One is a red ocean, which has 100 competitors, all are providing the same thing, right? They're providing more or less the same thing. And then you have another market which is called the blue ocean, where your product is so valuable. Your product is so valuable that it creates an entirely different market of its own. An example would be जब Elon Musk started Tesla, when Tesla came, it created a blue ocean of its own. उसके पहले electric vehicles थे ही नहीं market picture. Nobody was making, not one automobile manufacturer was making electric vehicles. But somehow Musk saw the potential of EV, and he figured out that why is it that people are not building EV. So then he figured that why is it people are not buying EVs? And he figured that because EVs are boring, EVs का design बेकार है, EVs की performance अच्छा नहीं है. So he fixed all of that technological problems and came up with a beautiful product, the Tesla X model, and that provided a lot of value to people who bought it. So whenever you're starting a business, think not from your perspective, think from the perspective of the customer, and do anything and everything to ensure that the customer is happy. If the person is happy with your service, that means that that you've won yourself a loyal customer. Am I clear? Clear enough?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Sir, I have a question.
Sure.
How do you decide whether your business model is B2B or B2C?
That depends on your idea, right? You don't
Yes,
decide
sir.
that depends on the idea you're following. Na? If you're building something for business, if you see a gap in the market, in terms of a business needing something which others are not doing, so your business model is B2B. If you're pursuing a customer problem, let's say a normal consumer's problem, that's B2C. How you decide a business model depends on the nature of business you're getting into. Are you trying to ask what kind of business models, or you're trying to ask how you decide a business model? These are two different questions. Did I repeat myself?
Yes, sir. Okay, sir.
No, did you understand the question answer, or you did not? That's what I'm asking.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, any more?
Good afternoon, sir.
Hi.
So my question regarding the topic is what are the legal structures and which work best for the tech startups aiming to raise funds?
The ones we have seen is the private limited structure, which works best for every tech startup that has started. Because it needs because if you were to raise funds, then the funds you would have to issue shares and include an investor as a third, issue some equity to the investor. So what we have seen, and it becomes easy in the case of private limited company, because when you start a private limited company, you have 10,000 shares. So if let's say there are two partners, so both are named as directors in a private limited company, both are issued at a 50-50% distribution. Each of them is issued 5,000 shares, and your company is valued at a certain value. It's valued. So there are different kinds of valuation techniques, but let's not get into that part. But you are given a certain valuation, saying that your valuation is 1 crore, right? At a working capital of 1 lakh or 5 lakh, whatever. So when you want to typically raise funds, this private limited company becomes an easy framework for you to raise funds, because all you have to do is include a new director, or include a new investor and offer him a board seat. But even in the private limited company itself, if you look at Facebook or Meta now, you would find that in the equity allocation part, in the cap table or the capitalization table typically, you would find that Mark Zuckerberg owns Class B shares. So typically in India, there are two types of shares rather. I'd say one share is the common shares, right, which is typically a share associated with a certain value. So let's say there are 10,000 shares for 1 lakh rupees working capital. So 10 rupees is the cost of each of those shares. So those are common shares. And then there are preferential shares typically, which also come with preferential shares have more value. Let's instead of 10 rupees, they will be 100 rupees. But they also come with voting rights. So, and they are typically allocated to investors, right? Because investors have the first right to exit anytime they want to exit. At the site of of an acquisition or maybe an IPO, they have the first right to exit. So, typically, the instruments today that are used are convertible notes and to a certain extent, safe instruments. Uh, uh, but I think the model that works very well with all of these is the private limited model in India.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah.
So my question is, at what stage should a startup focus on filing for intellectual property protection, like trademarks or patents?
At what point should a startup file?
Startup focus on filing for intellectual property protection.
I mean, it completely depends on whether you want to do that or not. Because the fact is that it doesn't matter actually. I mean, if you're a tech startup, let's say this, as Priyanshi asked, it does not matter at all because the patent procedure takes 3 to 5 years. So by the time your patent arrives, even if you file for a patent or your patent arrives in 5 years, the entire market would have changed 6 times. तो आप पेटेंट अपनी आत्मसंतुष्टि के लिए या अपने सेल्फ सेटिस्फेक्शन के लिए फाइल कर सकते हो, but that does not insulate you from the vagaries of the market. The market, as per Adam Smith's invisible hand, typically goes for the best products and services. So if your product is not great, intellectual property cannot protect you. So it is immaterial as of now, unless you're operating in one of these very highly technological industries like space tech, or let's say nanotech or biotech or any of these industries where you have to capital because where your entire company's business model depends on the invention that you come up with. In those specific industries, which are which are very capital intensive, you would require something like something like a patent. And copyright is typically to protect a brand. So when you are creating a brand, let's say you're creating a D2C brand, right? A direct to customer brand, and you want to create, you have value, you have belief in your brand. You feel that this could be the number one, let's say, utensil maker in India. This brand could be the number one brand. So you typically copyright your brand so that nobody should be able to take that brand thing away from you. So that could be done. That could be done anytime. Copyright, I don't think is a major problem, but patent is a lengthy procedure. So, and in your case, it does not matter because your algorithms that you write or in your company are proprietary. So, and your focus should be on selling the product, building a product and selling the product. If you file patent and all those things, it's good for your self-satisfaction, but it does not yield a tangible result per se. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
So we have 4 minutes left. If anybody wants to ask any questions. You have a
Yes,
question?
we're done. Thank you, sir, for the insightful session. Your session was inspirational and it has enlightened everyone, especially those who are planning to start their startups. Now, to formally conclude this session, I would like to invite our Director, Sir, Dr. V.V. Gopal, sir, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Yeah. Hi, am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are.
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks to Mr. Saurabh. I guess I couldn't sit through the entire session, but bits and pieces because a lot of people walking into my room and disturbing me. I had to take a lot of calls. So, very, very insightful inputs you have given. Thank you so much. And yeah, I mean, I think let's understand that, startups are not just about solving problems with technology. They're about solving relevant problems for real India. And that means understanding India 1, 2, and India 3. And that, I think, in bits and pieces, when I heard you were talking about India 1, 2, and 3. India 1, of course, I think, cherry picking, that's easy. But my guess is that, it's highly competitive, brand sensitive customers are there in India 1. Maybe we should be looking at India too because they're pretty aspirational. You see, there's a huge potential in healthcare, in skill-based ed tech, agri-tech, logistics, and all these areas. So India too is something that maybe, it's got the real untapped potential for startups in India. And I will always say that, build for Bharat, not for India.
Surprisingly, I built for Bharat. We started a startup called,
Yeah.
I think, Kali Jobs for blue collar people, but we were not able to sustain it for more than a year. So it becomes a bit
Okay.
difficult to make money from that kind of model.
Yeah, I think the market is still evolving. We got to give it some more time to catch up, appreciate, and look at value propositions. But of course, VCs won't have that patience. They want their pound of flesh
I
pretty
raised,
quickly.
I pitched some to 200 plus VCs in India and US and was able to pick up funds from around two VCs. So that's the rate.
Oh,
That's the typical strike rate,
strike rate, yeah, strike rate.
2 upon 200.
So yeah, students I think got a very good insight into the legal and ethical aspects of managing startups or how to do it. Some questions relating to IP contracts and things like that. Data privacy is something that maybe we could. I mean, given the bandwidth of time, you didn't want to probably digress into that. But data privacy concerns are also,
I think no,
pretty relevant.
initially I think nobody cares about all that because आपको पता है कि 100 में से जो है 98 बंद हो जाएंगे 6 महीने में.
Yeah.
That's reality.
So that's it. Okay. So all in all, looking at the clock again, all in all, India is not just one market. It is different markets with different worlds. And the future unicorns, when they come to serve in India, they'll rise. They need to rise from meeting a lot of India's unmet needs in tier 2 and tier 3 cities. And ethically and legally, we expect players to venture into these businesses. All in all, very very good 1 hour session for the students. I'm sure they would have learned a lot and thoroughly enjoyed it. And I wish I could have actually spent more time because there are so many questions that I would like to ask and interact with you. So Saurabh sir, thank you so much for coming on board and interacting with our students. And I would like to interact with you on a separate platform given an opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for
And
having me as a speaker here.
yeah.
I think this is one of the few sessions where people actually ask questions.
Oh my God, none of my students are very curious. In fact, a lot of them are very shy. If you come to a physical classroom, I think it would be different. But they are very shy, but they have a lot of curiosity, and that's one very
I would
nice
love
thing about my
to
students.
come to your campus sometime.
Sure, sir. We will welcome you because our students are back in July, sir. And July, I would like to also interact with you, spend more time. Faculty need to talk to you. I mean, the wealth of knowledge you are displaying about all the startups, it's going to be a great learning experience for all of us, students and
I'm
faculty.
writing my
So,
second book on startups, so I think it will be interesting to interact with your students. So I'll probably make it like a
absolutely, sir.
case study.
Get their insight. Sure, sir. Sure. We'll give you a platform and we would like to welcome you onto the campus. And my colleagues, Ritika madam and Ravikant sir, thank you. Thank you for organizing this wonderful session. Thank you. Good day.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Director, sir.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
sir.
Saurabh, sir.
So there are so many students who are doing their ventures or start like a startup. I think they have learned so many things. And thank you very much for this session, sir. Thank you very much, sir, Director, sir, and Ritika, ma'am. And we would like to have you in the physical mode when our students will be come back from the internship. That will be a more interactive session as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Fareem, please conclude the session and end up.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today and making this session a great success. We look forward to more upcoming events. Have a great day ahead. You may now leave the meeting.
Thank you very much, all the participants, for your patience listening, and thank you much. Thank you very much, sir.